Connected with identity, culture, history, where we come from as a people. Well, for most ethnic groups and nations, this history is found in history records and archives. But in a country like South Africa, people have learned from stories passed on from those that lived before. Now, this morning, we're going to be joined by Professor Natasha Erlank. She's the head of the Department of Historical Studies at the University of Johannesburg. A warm welcome to you, Prof, and thanks again for joining us. I know many people chose to sleep in this morning, being a holiday, but we thank you for coming and sharing your insights with us.
And thank you for having me on the show.
Prof, how important is it to preserve one's heritage, one's culture, by documenting it and by, oral history, just spreading the stories?
Well, I think it's tremendously important, and one of the things I'd like to say is that most people actually do document their heritage and their culture. They don't always do so in ways that are recognized, what we in a historical studies department might recognize as documenting. But in any family you go into, you'll find that they talk about their grandparents or the people who've been before them. They'll talk about the recipes they learned from their parents. Sons will talk about how they learned things from their fathers. So it's all there. It's all there. It's just that people don't often think of what they have in those terms as being heritage.
In a country like South Africa, where we have so many official languages, we have different cultures and subcultures within those cultures as well, how important is it to have a collective identity where we don't lose our individuality as the cultures, but we can adopt one whole history as a nation?
Well, I think we've been doing that relatively effectively. Whether it's a good thing or not is another matter, but I don't think anyone who's alive at the moment, even if they were small, forgets the World Rugby Cup in 1995. And those things are tremendously important in bringing people together, as long as they don't gloss over the stuff that's part of our heritage, but which we shouldn't forget, which is, the things that we don't necessarily want to remember, but which remain in the background.
We live in a global village, and we can't escape that. In the days of Twitter, Facebook, there's television, etc., where various other cultures outside of South Africa influence the culture that we have here in the country. There's a term called cultural imperialism that's doing the rounds as well, where the dominant Western nations and the movies and the cultural commodities that they sell dominate here on the local space. Are we in danger of losing our identity as South Africans because of the outside influence, you think?
I think cultural imperialism is something that's been really well documented and examined, but what people often forget is that the traffic in knowledge is always two-way. And what I'd encourage South Africans to think about is the things that they've carried elsewhere that other people have been picking up on from South Africa. So I don't think we're in any danger of losing our identity, our heritage as a nation. And I think we should think about the kinds of things that people overseas have picked up from us. The Mandela shirt, for instance.
Many other things. I want us to talk a bit about what we export or what we have to bring to the table as far as the globe is concerned. The clothing and textile industry, the traditional attire. I mean, I saw it on a few runways recently where the prints, is something that's it's inherently African, and we've exported that. The food, the culture. You mentioned the most iconic Nelson Mandela. What other attributes or proudly South African inventions or for lack of a better word, goods do we give to the world?
I can be a bit cynical about this one, but I'll avoid that for today. I think that there's a particular South African spirit that you see. It's an ad, I can't remember which one it is, but it's got a Johnny Clegg song in it, and you see hands joining, and certainly when South Africans go overseas, and this is across the board. You bump into a South African in an airport in Europe, and they're always willing to chat to you, and they'll always chat to someone else. So for all that, South Africa is recognized, unfortunately, for high levels of violence. Everyone I've spoken to outside the country comments on how friendly South Africans are.
And how do we protect that going forward so that this time next year, when it's Heritage Day, we can speak about how progressive we are and how we're still doing so well? How do we protect that image that we have as the friendly South Africa, the nation of reconciliation?
Well, we keep on talking. We keep on talking amongst ourselves, and we keep on talking with people who are different to ourselves. And we just keep on talking, and we keep on sharing the stories of our lives with others so that they know where we've come from and they know where they've come from. And I think it's in that process of exchange, of sharing, that we create some of what is uniquely South African.
We'll have to leave it there for now. Dialogue, I think what came out there, very, very important. Also to share the history and to keep it going and also discuss what is coming and what has happened. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's where we leave it now. The professor joining us just to share how history is so important in documenting our heritage. With that said, let's not waste time. Let's take a look at what the weather has.